Ladies and gentlemen, Greg Schaffer.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And welcome to the Virtual CISO Moment. Some of you may know the podcast, Virtual CISO Moment. I know some of you do, some of you don't. The Virtual CISO Moment is a podcast that is designed to help small and mid-sized businesses, as well as also help people on their whole cybersecurity journey. I started the podcast when I really started my firm back about 5 years ago, because I wanted to do something to get the word out. It's like, hey, I'm doing this cool thing, right? And I thought I could do marketing. Marketing is hard, by the way. It's very hard. And I thought, well, let me do this little video vignettes. So a few minutes each. Originally started as just 1 minute. I call it the Virtual CISO Minute, where I would talk about things like risk assessments, business continuity, things that small and mid-sized businesses sometimes don't really even think about that they need to do. Well, that then progressed because I realized I couldn't get everything in within 1 minute because I tend to talk a lot. If you listen to the podcast, you know that. And so it became the Virtual CISO Moment. It was like 7, 8, 9 minutes, no short video vignettes. And I kind of did it here and there, kind of let it go. And then last fall, I got an email from Spotify, actually from Anchor from Spotify, where they were doing a new program where they were looking for people who have done video content to go ahead and put together, to apply to be on the Spotify platform. Because up until then, I mean, it'd be very hard for someone like me with a very small following to get on Spotify, small following at the time. So I applied and, hey, I got it, and that's great. But now I've got to start doing regular content. So I retooled the beginning of the year. I figured, okay, I'm going to do a video every Tuesday, and I'm going to make sure that I stick to it religiously. But you know what? I started that, and I realized I bore myself. And so I came up with the idea. It's not an original idea. Everybody does it. Joe Rogan's great at it. Get people on to tell their stories. Because ultimately, like, one of the things that makes Joe Rogan so successful is that he just asks questions. He just lets people tell their stories. So I started that first guest was March 1st of this year. I went to my comfort guests, I call them, colleagues that I've known for years, that I'm like, well, maybe they'll come on if I bribe them with a coffee or a beer or something like that. But it then began to take off. Now I'm at a point where I'm booked through next June. And it's because people like hearing stories. And everybody's story is different. And so today, you're going to hear my story. And hopefully, when all is said and done, I'm not all said and done yet. I think I'm in about the 4th quarter of my career, so I've learned a lot. And I've also learned what, to me, is the secret of cybersecurity. But in order to get there, I've got to take you all through a little bit of a walk through my career first. A lot of it for context, and a lot of it because there's relevance. And you'll have to forgive me because I'm old school. I like people. And I got to keep myself honest with the notes here. So my career actually started in IT, kind of not IT. I was an aircraft mechanic, they call it a crew chief, in the Air Force Reserves. Back I went to basic training in 1989. I think it was 89. Yeah, it was 89. And I was a student at the University of Buffalo at the time, but my computer experience and knowledge was limited. I did have a PC at home. It was a Hyundai. It was a PC clone, they called it at the time. No hardware, just 2 dual-disc floppy drives, the real floppy ones, the ones that are 5 1/4 inch. I don't even think you can find those in a museum anymore. But my programming experience was limited to Fortran 77. Now, the reason for Fortran is because I was in the engineering field, and that is very useful for very fine mathematical computations. But I was working at fast food, I worked at Burger King, I worked at a diner for a bit, and I saw that the university's computing center was looking for part-time student assistants to work on their computer network. I'm like, yay, I don't know what to do there, but I'll apply because it'd got to be better than working at Burger King. And I applied, and the person that I applied, he was a former drill instructor in the Marines. Now, I won't say former Marine, but a former drill instructor. He wasn't doing too much of a drill instructor. I guess he did a little. He still had that attitude. But he told me, he said, if you can follow a TO, a technical quarter, to fix airplanes, then you can fix networks. So that's how I got started working as a part-time student assistant. Now, it was great working at University of Buffalo at the time, multi-protocol network. Again, I am kind of seasoned, I think is the word I want to use. I have been around for a while. Back then, we didn't have twisted pair Ethernet. We did have the beginnings of Ethernet. We had ThickNet, they called it, which was basically a thick coax cable that you would run up a closet stack in a vertical building. That's why it's called backbone, because it resembles a backbone. If you ever wonder why we talk about backbones in networking? And you would connect to that with what they call transceivers. They had vampire taps that you kind of just tap right into the thing. And then from there, you could run whatever device you had. We had BidNet, which was 2 megabits per second. From there to the client workstations with little T connectors and probably things that you've never seen before. Now, our plan was really not to get into networking or IT at that time. It was just to have a good job at the university and to continue on with my mechanical engineering career. But I got to learn some things. Now, I've got some books out on the table that's actually, we've written them primarily me based on our experiences as being virtual CISOs over the last 5 years. So it's something that we give away to folks usually at conferences and such. But I'm going to give away one every now and then. I'm going to ask a question. If you answer the question right, then you get a book. So my first question is, while I was at the University of Buffalo, that's when I got exposure to the first browser that I ever used. What was the first browser? Wait, what was it? No. 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 No.
Mozilla.
No. Okay, it was links. Did anyone say links? You said links? Get up. Sorry, you gotta get up, I'm sorry. Yeah, links was actually a non-graphical browser. It was the first HTTP communication device, I guess, if you will, within Linux. And to the point, too, it was like, that's when I first started working on Linux. So we didn't have packages at the time. I compiled with kernel. But it was so cool. It's like, even though it's not graphical, it was just text. You could actually like choose something and it would go somewhere else. It's like, wow. Now, from then, I continued to take courses, but I really liked the networking stuff. And also, my mechanical engineering career kind of hit the skids when the job that I thought I was going to get, where I was an intern for about a year, they eliminated the position, and then, okay, I don't have a job right now. And so I didn't have that. That was not the best thing. But I continued at the University of Buffalo. I decided, okay, I got my bachelor's. I'll continue in the electrical engineering field. And I was working at the university at that point in time full time. They said, well, if you want to continue your studies, we'll do full time. Was there for a couple of years, really enjoyed it. Really got into it because I realized then it's like I really love the networking aspect of it. But I want to do more of the design work. And so I wanted to become a network engineer. And I went on Monster. Does Monster still exist as a job site? Okay, well, it existed back then too. And so thank you, Monster. Monster brought me down here to Tennessee. I got a job at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, at the hospital there. When I told a buddy of mine, I didn't know anything about power trouble. And when I told a buddy of mine in New York that I was going to go work for UT in Knoxville, he said, you're going to be a paid volunteer. I had no idea what he was talking about. So I learned. Now, began to learn some more lessons with regards to networking back then. Now, a friend of mine, colleague of mine, and yes, it was a colleague of mine, it wasn't me, at the university, he was configuring a network interface. So we had a backbone with 3 routers and all that. And he was more of a developer person at the time, but he was learning the IP side. And he did a great job configuring the interface. Did it perfectly. Wrong router. Took down surgery. Yeah, back then, that wasn't too bad because it wasn't that dependent on networking at the time. It wasn't as if they were literally life and death, but still, it was not the best thing to do. Learned a lot about DNS back then, but then I felt that I was ready to lead a network team of my own, and that led me to Middle Tennessee, to Murfreesboro. I was at Middle Tennessee State for 12 years, which is a long time to be in one place. And it's been about as long that I've been gone from Middle Tennessee State. So, and went through some level of progression there. I didn't intend to be there 12 years. My whole deal was, what I wanted to do is that Middle Tennessee had a flat network. If you're in network, you probably understand what that means. Basically, it wasn't subnetted at all. 3,000 nodes, broadcast storms out the wazoo. We didn't have really a switched environment. Everything was still hubs at the time. And so performance was bad. I figured, okay, I'm going to come in like Superman, and I'm going to go ahead and solve the network problem. Probably take me about 3 years to get that all working, to slowly move those off this one huge /16 subnet onto all these /24s. And finally get to the point where, okay, I got this done, put it on my resume, maybe go somewhere else, become a CISO. It was kind of like I was saying. But I loved it too much. Working in a college environment, by the way, is just absolutely fabulous. Most of the time. Until peer-to-peer file share came about. And here's another book question. Does anybody know what the first peer-to-peer, the first, I guess, ubiquitous peer-to-peer file sharing system was? Answer, book. If you want. Thank you, yes, answer. And so the students, they a lot of times people look going to college at the time because that's where you get your high-speed internet. I think it's kind of flipped now. But back then it was like, ooh, it's great, but I'm going to have actually Ethernet in the dorm. I'm going to be able to share all this stuff. And that was my introduction to security. Because not from a confidentiality or an integrity standpoint, but from an availability, they were killing our network with all these downloads. Never mind the copyright problems that we had and all that. And I implemented the first firewall there. The way that actually worked is that you had to actually go, it wasn't true peer-to-peer, you had to go to a central, I guess you could call it a CC, command and control bot that then would, get you to the place that you wanted to go. And I redirected that to our central use page. I was not exactly the most popular person in Middle at that time. Anyway, continued on through Middle, but during this time, I also started Cybersecurity, and this kind of started by igniting my consulting side. And that was writing for Computer. And if you go out there, if you Google Schaffer Computer, you'll probably still find my articles from 2006 to 2009. I think my last one was a whole slew of my resume advice that probably some of it still holds true today. I'm not going to check that out. It might not. But I went from progression at TSU, and I think you should always be progressing in your career. As Steve said, it's always a learning process. I am always learning. I mean, I'm in account Linux now. So it's like, hey, I'm doing something that's relatively new, but Linux again been around for a long time. And I went from network manager, director of network services to assistant vice president for network and information technology security. I needed 3 business first for that. And it was a great career path, but then I felt like I could still do more. I always had that urge to want to do a little more. And about this time, Metro National gave us an account. They were looking to hire their first CISO, and I took that position. And that was a good position to have at the time. It was an opportunity to lead and to implement a security program. And I loved a lot of aspects of it. It is so cool. I think we had roughly 55 departments and agencies. Some were appointed, some were elected. had a little bit of a challenge working with those that were elected, but it was a lot of good stuff, and there was some stuff that I'll just say, to me, wasn't too good. And that's probably the first lesson that I'm going to say here, is that sometimes you might come across, and I think everybody should have this experience once, when you come across a job that you realize shortly when you're into it, that this is not the right fit. And then I was at Metro for 15 months. 3 months into it, I was already starting to work. And eventually, I landed at a bank, First Bank. You're probably familiar with First Bank, the physical big presence here in Tennessee. Used to have their headquarters out in Lexington, Tennessee. Used to go there every Tuesday, but then they moved their headquarters to Nashville, and then they went IPO, and now they've become huge. And I understand now they're Vanderbilt's football stadium is like First Bank stadiums. Wow, why didn't they do that for NTSU? But anyway, I would have loved that. But I'm learning it. I'm at a bank, and up until this time, all my paychecks have been government paychecks. I've never been in the private sector. Never been in a highly regulated industry like banking. But it was scary, and I learned, and that was another scratch for me. And at this point in time, another thing happened too, between that and Metro, is that I started to become more exposed to the whole information security community in the Nashville area. If you're not involved with the broader community, I mean, I love the fact that I see a lot of like people in the early stages of their career here. I'm like, that's awesome. I wish I had done that when I was at your stage. Do not discount networking. It is the most important thing that you can do in your career. I'm not talking data networking, I'm talking people and talking. It's so important. It's so important. I'm at First Bank for a while, ended up being about 5.5 years. About 5 years in, started to get, I got the urge to do maybe a little bit of consulting. Remember, I've done a little bit of the writing and some other little side gigs I had. And I queried a couple of folks that offered virtual CISO services. Just they weren't looking for folks, but I queried two. One I never heard from. The other one said, hey, I just got a new company. And I could use some help. I'm like, well, how many hours? Just like, 5 hours a week or something, I'll pay you $4,000 per month. I'm like, cool, I like that. And so I started to go down that path, and I'm being mentored now by someone who's actually in the field, which is great. That led to another client, not all the same rate. But by the time I got to summer of 2017, I'm working 3 clients through him, and I'm still working with him, by the way. I help on 2 clients only because I have so much respect and loyalty for him. But I realized in 2017, in the middle of summer, it's like, you know what? I think I might not need to do this. And the reason why I realized is I got a little tap on the shoulder. Now, for me, this is God like for me. God told me, look, you're doing good with the talents you have. I think you can do a little bit better. And I'm like, that's great. I like to eat. I don't know if this is going to work. I always had a paycheck coming from somebody else. But it's always the best thing to say yes to God. And I did. All I wanted to do was earn $60,000 a year. I did a risk assessment, financial risk assessment. That's all I wanted to do. Well, now that one of the CISO services, beyond that, have 6 other folks right now working for me. We have clients all over the United States. We have one out in the Caribbean, and we've been growing year over year over year. It's just been a fabulous experience because it also gives the opportunity to share knowledge, and hence that's where the book came from. So that's enough about the walk down my path here. Now, does this look familiar to anybody? The left and the right. Let's start with the left. Show of hands, who knows what the OSI model is? Heard it? Okay, this is not a book bust, but a shout out. What's layer 8? I heard a lot of things that I couldn't hear what they said, but I didn't know what I'm talking about. I'll say it's political. So, but when I was at the University of Buffalo, this is why I went through that whole little walk down memory lane for me. I had to work with some cool stuff. Now, you guys, here, I'll ask you, this is a book question. What is, it's so hard to see, I apologize, but you might be able to figure it out. On the right-hand side, it's the right. Let's see right here. On the right-hand side, what is that picture? Okay. A lot of you said that. If you want to raise it, if not, that's cool. Yeah, that's Wireshark. Well, Wireshark actually came from Ethereal, which came from, I don't remember where that came from, but prior to that, at least from my experience, used TCP dumped in Linux. You probably are familiar with that, right? As a packet tracer, sniffer. That's what I refer to it as. I don't like to, I guess you can call it PCAP, but I don't know. It's kind of been a little politicized over the last couple of years, too. But the first sniffer I worked with, now mind you, I'm like a 20-year-old student here at the University of Buffalo. We had this big, lovable computer from Network General. It was called a Network General Sniffer. They would cost like 16 grand. And yet they would let me earn like at the time like $7 an hour, which was awesome, by the way. It was a little less, but it was the experience that counted. But I'm using this hugely expensive piece of equipment to diagnose Ethernet networks. Now, whether it be twisted thinnet or we did migrate eventually to twisted pair, I'm learning at that point in time that how packets are constructed, how the OSI model works, how to troubleshoot. We didn't have terms like red team and blue team and purple team and red squad leader and whatever. We had one term, it was called troubleshooting. And so we used sniffers to troubleshoot. Now I would gather that probably today, all of you in information security and cybersecurity, whatever you want to call it, probably are familiar with using sniffers. Is that fair thing to say? So the lesson here is that, and maybe this is kind of a little self-serving for me too, is that which seems old from 30 years ago up here is still relevant today. Yeah. Another story from back then with a lesson associated with it, oh, this is my old disk. I was going to do a hook question and say, well, can someone identify what that thing is? And I think that was just kind of too silly. I was going to ask if you knew what the size of this was, but I thought that was too silly too. So it's an advanced copy, I guess, at the time, 1.44 megabytes. Well, I was studying a student at the University of Buffalo. We had LANs set up, local area networks set up in areas where all that they were doing was that they were just using a server. They didn't have any sort of internet access. Well, I already learned a little bit of my networking through working at the university and knew a little bit about how to load drivers and machines. Now, computers back then did not come with TCP/IP stack loading. It didn't exist. Windows did not have it anyway. This is Windows 3.1, I think, 8.3.1. But they didn't have the IP stack loaded natively. And so these machines, they were just really part of a Novell network running IPX. And book question. Can anyone tell me what IPX stands for? Yes, book. I heard it from somewhere over there. This is Internet. Wait, did you say Internet or Internet network? Okay, yes. Book if you want. That is what Novell used as far as protocols. You have everything's IP nowadays. But back then, it truly was multi-protocol networks. You had to learn more and more about all these different things. And you had to learn how to configure them on machines. But anyway, getting back to the story. So you have this LAN here. And a lot of times, like I go to the university libraries, like how to get on the internet. At this point in time, yes, they did have graphical browsers, Mosaic, to go surf the net and go find stuff, but they were always crowded. But the LAN part, usually there's always like several machines open. I created what I call my home disk. My home disk was basically had a batch file on it that I ran, had loaded drivers on it, loaded the IP stack. I chose an IP address. I don't think I had conflicts too much. But then I got on the internet and people were like, how did you do this? And I'm like, dude, it's my home disk, man. How did I get that? And I always wanted to monetize it, but I'm like, nah, that would probably be unethical. But maybe in a sense, just by doing that in the lab as we're going up. Well, I don't know, maybe you call it happy, maybe you wouldn't, but I was able to go and get my work done. No harm, no foul. Nobody lost to see on the land there. The lesson from this particular story is that I worked harder to avoid working harder. Now, as a corollary to that, another example is we have a lot of networks at the university. It's very difficult to imagine that Ethernet was not the primary network there. It was mainly serial connections on phone lines and went to various either direct connections to controllers or multiplexers, or sometimes they would go to what they call nodes at the time for networking technology called DCA. And I can't remember what it stands for. Now, I was in support. This is when I'm working full time, and I get paged every now and then, day and night. Some of you may know what a pager is. That's basically an annoying little thing that you have to take with you 24 hours a day. And I have to drive to the university and reset one of these DCA nodes because they won't equip and they would always go down. But I came up with an idea on how to do a backend through the Kaya Club. You know, we connect the backend to Kaya and all those, you know, that sort of stuff. And very, very slow, but it still works. I mean, that's why I got my Hyundai computer, because I didn't need the disk drives, I didn't need the hard drive, I just needed to get to the university's network. And so I used my Hyundai computer through this backdoor that I put in order to be able to get to the DCA nodes, in order to reboot it, so that I could do this while I'm having a beer and I had no drive. And it was wonderful. And again, the lesson here from this little takeaway from this little story is that if you work harder to avoid working harder, if you put proper policies and procedures in place, this is so important in cybersecurity and information security. If you do that on the front end, you put so much effort on the governance part of it, so then on the back end, you're not having to deal with breaches and such. I was going to call this one the glory days, but I figured that would A, make me sound too old, and B, since it's an old Bruce Springsteen song from, 38 years ago, that would also make me sound old. So I do a good job being old on my own. So we'll call it the early days, and trying to give you an idea about what the late 90s were like. I talked a little bit about the environment, talked a little bit about the Novell network back then. So one other question about the Novell networks. What does CNE stand for? Does anybody remember? Book. Did you already get one?
No.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I knew there was something from over there. Were you a CNE?
Yes, sir. Or CNA, I was actually an A.
Okay, well that's still 311, 312, 411?
312.
Okay, me too. Watch the camera. I have fears that it's going to get hit and get knocked down. I should put it just a little bit up. Yeah, so Novell networks at the time, and we had an issue with interoperability. It isn't like today where things are like plug and play. You expect that when you buy a switch, no matter where it's from, unless it's like, you know, a Cisco that's like actually made like in China is not. But you expect that networking equipment is going to work together. But back then that wasn't the case. And so the best conference in the world, I think, at the time, was something called Interop. It was in Las Vegas. That's part of what made it the best conference in the world. That got me to Vegas on the state's dime, whether it be, well, I guess it could have been all Tennessee, because that's where I was working when I first went to Vegas. And it was there that I got my first really cool certification. Now, certifications were just starting to become more popular. So I had a Cisco certification. I obviously had a CNE. And I think I was actually a CNA in about 4. I didn't go to a CNE. But there was a group called Pine Mountain, and they had the first widely recognized vendor-agnostic training. It was absolutely fabulous. I'm so upset to this day that for whatever reason, Bill Alderson, he folded it or he moved on to something else, but it was just absolutely fabulous. But something else started to happen towards the end of that decade as well. And that's when boot camps started. And first of all, as a former military, I don't really like the term, I don't like repurposing military terms sometimes, particularly when we talk about like going to war. It's like war is a really bad thing, okay? And I would prefer that it not be used in kind of like just rough statements, but in any case, they call these boot camps. So they still have them today. You go, and Steve was talking about this to an extent as far as training goes. You go through courses, 5 days, you come out with a certification, and people would get these certifications left and right, but they were finding out that people really didn't know what to do with it. We call them paper tigers. So what I would do, and this is now when I'm at MTSU, is, because that's when I first got to the point of actually hiring people, I would ask questions that would test for applied knowledge. So here's an example. It would be a two-tier question. The first question would be, what application is TCP port 23 assigned to? Most of you will be able to say, tell me. No, it's not a question, but very good. And then the next question is, and because of the emphasis on security now, we went to school back 20 years ago, now it's probably more obvious, but the next question would be, why should you not allow telnet inbound through your firewall? Exactly. But a lot of times people couldn't answer that. They would stammer, they would be like, I'm not sure, or they would sometimes try to fudge the answer. I'm going to give those who are starting out, and even those who are moving up in their career right now, don't do that in an interview. The person who's asking you the question knows the answer to the question. And if you stammer through it, the best thing to say is like, you know what, I don't know, I know how to look that up, or I should know that, I'm forgetting it, I'm nervous in the interview. That's cool. You show you're human, because nobody remembers everything. I mean, that's why we have those technical orders back when I was in the Air Force, for example, so that we had to do everything exactly by what was in that technical order. You could not put it aside and say, well, I don't remember how to do this, because you get in trouble, but inevitably you also potentially miss something. So the lesson for this, and I'm really building on something that Steve said, is certifications are the beginning, not the end. Okay? The beginning of learning. And I'm also going to go down a little corollary here, because there's a big amount of discussion on, particularly on LinkedIn, about do you need certs or a degree to get into cyber and all of that? And no, but you need to work. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that just a little bit. I'm getting ahead of this up here. What did I do here? Okay. I'm always kind of amazed by the term cyber, but how many people here go to MTSU? Anybody? Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to be able to answer this question, but if you can, that's great. Obviously, the event on the right, we know about. We just had the 21st. I don't want to say anniversary because that sounds like you're celebrating. Absolute horrible day. Everybody who's over 35 knows where they were probably at that point in time. But on the left, the question is, what was the name of this building prior to, or at the time of 9/11? No, the one on the left. Yeah. I don't think. Okay. So sorry about that. I thought I had more MTSU folks here. I was trying to do something home to you. But that's Woodmore Cafeteria at MTSU, which now is called the Chris Young Cafe. But in the middle of it, they call it the Cyber Cafe. And so I went to the Cyber Cafe on September 11, 2001, when I first heard on the internet, probably using Netscape as a browser at the time, that something bad was happening. I went there, and they had these big tube screens on huge mountains there, and I got there just in time to see the second tower, or the first tower, the south tower fall. That was when they said the second plane, the first one fall. Absolutely horrible. But it got me to thinking about cyber. There is another debate that you'll see on LinkedIn sometimes about what is cybersecurity, what is information security. I'm going to tell you how I define it because I think it's the right way, but it may not be. Cybersecurity is a subset of information security. Cybersecurity is everything that is technical. So your firewalls, your SIEMs, your routers, your antivirus, all the threat hunting, the red teaming, the blue teaming, the troubleshooting, all that fun stuff. That's all the technical stuff. Information security includes that, as well as risk management, risk assessment, business continuity, governance, which is absolutely huge, policies and procedures, and I explained a little bit before why those are so important. But I might be talking to somebody who thinks that it's the exact opposite. Because some people will say, well, no, information security is a subset of cybersecurity. And then if you throw in IT security into all this, it gets everybody all whacked out. Personally, I always have thought that cyber was a marketing term that I thought would go away. It did. Then it came back. I was hoping it would go away again. It didn't. So cyber is here to stay, which is why I call this the secret to success in cybersecurity. I could say information security, which is really what I wanted to say. Most of you probably like hearing cyber regular. The lesson from this story is that you need to be sure that when you're communicating, that both sides understand exactly the terminology you're using. And it's not just cyber versus info. It's anything that you're doing. And it's so critical when you're trying to solve something because, and particularly some of you may end up working for companies that have international presence, and there can be an awful lot of confusion. And we even pronounce things differently here in the States. Some people say CISO, some people say CISO, some people say CISO. I think CISO is more Australian, to tell you the truth. I like CISO, so. All right. Yeah. Anybody know who this is? This is Mary Carl Lee. He was mayor of Nashville in 2007. He had to offer no-cost ID theft protection. Does anybody, this is a good question, does anybody know why he had to do that to residents of Metro Nashville in 2007? Did somebody say something? Yes, you can look. Laptop stolen. Awesome. Awesome. This would be a pivotal moment in my career, by the way. But that's not why I'm talking about this here. A laptop was stolen that contained the names and social security numbers of 337,000 Metro Nashville voters. Not a good thing for someone who was just elected mayor, without a doubt. It's on the front over there. Yeah, and watch the camera, please. Yeah. Well, no, you don't have to go. I see one thing. So the cool thing about it for me, I shouldn't say cool, but that's what ended up leading to the mayor convening a group of folks in the security community called the Information Security Advisory Board, which, by the way, I was just talking with a colleague of mine who was on that, who was part, in fact, he'll be on the podcast at the end of September. So September 30th, Mark Burnett, we recorded an episode last week up at the InfoSec National in that conference up there in the Music City Center. But anyway, Mark was telling me that the only reason why he got on the ISAC was because he didn't know the mayor, but he networked with folks, and it was just word of mouth on how he got on there. So anyway, they ended up coming up with two recommendations. One, create a program that's standards-based, which we did, and two, bring someone on board to lead it, and that was me. But the significance to why I'm saying this has nothing to do with my career arc at that point, but it has to do with a few things that were missing. I'm going to read you the things that were missing, because if you don't know the laptop story, you certainly don't know, as Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story. That was Paul Harvey. So the laptop, let me start, just paint this, okay? The laptop was visible through a window on the ground floor. The laptop, around the window, did not have bars in front of it. The laptop, or the window rather, did not have it did have a glass break alarm, but the alarm was not working. The laptop wasn't physically secured. Now, I could probably let that go, but I can tell you from experience that after this event, we always had to have our laptops physically secured if we weren't at our desk with a cable. The camera that covered the window, the security camera, that day was broken. The security guard who was walking around the area doing their patrol, for whatever reason, at the time that the laptop was stolen, the security guard should have been there, but wasn't there. And the laptop was unencrypted. So, those controls failed. Now, there's one other that failed, and this is a hugely important thing. It's a good question. I guess it's the last one, because there's only one more vote left with it. Who can guess what the last control failure was? No. No. It's not technical. I'm hearing things, but I don't think I'm hearing the right answer. So if I say it and you say, "Oh no, I said that," then copy it. There was no business reason for that information to be on the laptop. None whatsoever. Somebody did this for convenience. Now, information security is all about securing information. It's about risk management. And if you have information that you're storing somewhere that you have no business need to store, you are accepting risk without any reward. So all this stuff that Metro had to go through, including hiring me, they might not have had to have gone through if they had just addressed maybe one or two of these controls, but certainly if the information was not there, no exposure. And so that's really the lesson, the main lesson there. The alternate lesson is that you always want to do defense in data. Don't rely on one primary control. Use compensating controls. Because ultimately, a lot of times we have auditors come in and they say, well, you're not running network access control, so you failed this audit. But if you can prove that you have 4 or 5 other controls in place that mitigate that risk, then you've done what you're supposed to do, which is mitigate the risk. It's not satisfying the auditor's one-line thing. That's part of what I do as a virtual CISO, is that I act as that translator. All right, last story. I'm pretty sure this is the last story. I'm not going to read this because we do not have time to read this, but this was actually the second last story. I'm going to go through this fast. On LinkedIn, there was a bad advice that was given. And basically, again, not reading this, but this person said, hey, and first of all, I want to emphasize that I have no reason to doubt that this person's heart was in the right place. But this was just horrible. They basically said, to summarize, to get into cybersecurity, this is all you need to do. Just put on your LinkedIn profile that you're a virtual CISO. And then you can start getting gigs working for small mom-and-pop businesses, even pro bono. And you can use that opportunity to tune your methodology. And then eventually you will be a virtual CISO. You'll get inside. Well, first of all, as someone who became virtual CISO based on years and years of experience, I found that offensive. But unfortunately, the industry right now has a lot of virtual CISOs that do not have risk management experience. But there are 2 big risks here. The first one is to business. Because if you have someone who doesn't understand risk management, giving risk management advice, the business could end up in a much worse area than what they were before, and not even realize it. The second is that if you took this advice and you put that on there, you know what the person is basically asking you to lie. And it takes a long time to build up a reputation. You can lose it real fast. Don't lie. That's why the CISO, the code of ethics, is so important. All right, and I know I'm getting short on time, but I do want to talk about this person for a second. This is a stick figure. You can probably tell. You're probably wondering, why did I have to go to WikiHow to get a stick figure? Why didn't I just draw one? Well, originally it was a placeholder, and I was going to draw one, but first of all, I got lazy. But second of all, I thought it was so funny that WikiHow must actually have an entry on how to draw a stick figure. So I didn't look it up, but it might be there. I want you to do a thought experiment. We don't have time to actually demonstrate this, but you can do this at home. Consider that So this person, this little stick figure is on a piece of paper. It's two-dimensional, right? And that's all the person knows length and width, all right? And then, and I can kind of demonstrate here, you can kind of see the person here. Oh wow, finger over it, and it makes a shadow, right? Now, to the little stick figure, they have no idea what's going on. They see this blob, which is just like coming and going out of nowhere. It's freaking them out. But if they're smart enough, through mathematics and through intuitive thinking, they might think, you know what, maybe there's a third dimension. Maybe, if there was a third dimension, then maybe what we see is a result of that third dimension, some way, shape, or form. And then they write up equations, and you know what? It satisfies the equation, and they have actually discovered another dimension. Well, we do that today. They say that there's multiple dimensions, and they can prove it mathematically, but we can't see it because we are three-dimensional beings, but we can infer other dimensions based on things that we can see. Now, in cybersecurity, we don't often see the effects of intrusion. At least not directly. I remember in this too that there was a worm called Slammer. It was early 2003. Totally gone down the network, not totally, but it was going to the point where it got network. And well, we had routers in place. I'd already done my whole segment and by that point. I was on 5 years into my career and loved it there. And I'm like, this is easy. I'll just use the ACLs and routers. I sniffed it. I could figure out source estimation, all that. I sniffed it. There were a lot of things to try to block. I don't remember the exact details about it, but the point being is that I tried it on the routers and it just made it worse. What the heck is going on here? And what I inferred is that what was going on is that there were so many attempts to set up multiple routes. Because remember, routers are stateful. They're keeping route tables in there. And so when each one coming in, that's churning up new CPU cycles. But at the time, there was an old networking company called Cabletron. They eventually morphed into Terraces, and I don't remember where they went from there. But Cabletron, back in the 90s, had created something called a smart switch, particularly a smart switch 2200. Way ahead of its time. Way ahead of its time. Long story short, I was able to use that to put in the ACLs, but since it's a switch, not a router, as you all know, because you all know the OSI model, it's not going to keep routes, it doesn't care. And bingo, MPSC went down. Now, if I remember correctly, there was a sister school to the west of us that had some serious problems for a few days, but we never went there. So the lesson here is that use your skills to infer what the problem may be. You may not be able to directly see it. And you know what, in business, you don't have the luxury to do that. You can't get to the point of being 100% sure of something. Remember what I said, information security, which cyber is a component of that, is about risk management. So what is the secret to success in cybersecurity? We've waited for about 54 minutes to meet that one and tell you about it. You know, my hope is that by sharing my story, that you learn maybe something, not because you learn something directly, but because you see something in the stories that I told that maybe you can apply. Maybe not again directly, but you can infer from the stories that I told. Things that will help you in your career. And it's the storytelling, which will get back to the beginning of this talk. It's like why I do virtual CISO movement. Hearing other people's stories is just wonderful. And I'm so blessed to be in a position right now where I can actually get their stories out. Because ultimately, that's how we all learn. It's not through the book. It's not just through hands-on in the web. It's from collaboration. It's from serving others and letting them serve you. Serving business. Serving your community. I think I look back at my career, and again, I'm not done, but I'm getting closer. And the titles, they're cool. The salary is cool. But the times when I've really truly made a difference, those are the things I remember. Those are the things that I carry forward. And that's why my little firm, CISO Services, has thrived. because we keep that at the forefront. It's our mantra. And I'm so passionate about it. At least in my eyes, my mind. The secret to success in cybersecurity is that if you have a heart of a servant,